I'm going to show you how to use paper mache to cover this plastic mask form. So the supplies you're going to need today, everyone's going to need one of these plastic masks. You're also going to need some strips of newspaper, and I'll show you what size to tear those into. You're also going to want a container with the paper mache paste in it. It's a clear paste. And if you don't have your own container, you can just share with somebody else at your table. So the first thing you need to do is get one singular piece of newspaper and just fold it the natural way that it folds. What you need to do is rip it into strips. Now you want to start from the side that's the folded side and rip down. When you do this, you want them to be fairly thin. So I'm going to look at about the width of my thumb. You want it to be about that width, so it's not a big strip, okay? I like to set it down on the table and rip it straight down like that, okay? So it's fairly consistent. If your paper is not ripping nice and straight, if it's ripping all over the place, you probably either want to get a different piece of paper or you're not ripping it from the right direction. If I rip it from this folded side here, I should be okay. I'm going to rip a few more. Okay, but if I tried to rip it from the other side, going the other way, you can see it just rips into a mess. So you have to rip it from the right way. After I get the long skinny pieces ripped, I need to break these down a little bit. This is too much. So I'm going to rip them in half. There's already a little crease there for me. And then I'll rip those strips in half again. So that by the time I'm done, what I'm left with is I'm left with several strips that are about the same length as my hand, approximately, and about the same width as my thumb. You want them to be pretty skinny. So I already have quite a few of these ripped up. You want to get at least one newspaper, one piece of paper ripped up before you get started, because there's nothing worse than running out of newspaper strips halfway through. Then you have to go wash your hands and stop what you're doing to rip up more strips. All right, I'm just going to set these off to the side and get started. With the mask, we are going to be covering the whole front of the mask, and we're even going to go off down the edges. We are not, however, going to go behind the mask. That will create problems. Since this mask is very slippery and has this shiny plastic coating on it, we don't need to put plastic wrap down. If we were covering an object with paper mache and it didn't have a slick surface like this, we'd always put plastic over it. But this was designed for the paper mache to come off relatively easily. So the first thing you want to do is dunk your paper mache, or dunk your newspaper strip into the paper mache, and it is kind of slimy. You just want to strip the extra off by taking your fingers kind of like a squeegee and get the rest of that off. A lot of people just think that they can, you know, put a little bit on their strip. That doesn't work so well. You actually want to dunk it and squeegee it, because then the paper mache adhesive gets into the fibers of the newspaper. When you start putting your paper mache on, I recommend that you start going right across the forehead for your first layer. And I like to just gently smooth it down, going horizontally across the face. Then grab another one. You just do the same thing. Dunk, squeegee. I like to overlap on the second one, just by a little bit. Make sure that you smooth it out so that it's not lumpy. Every single time you put a new piece on here, you want to smooth it. You're going to cover the entire face of your mask using this technique by getting your strips nice and straight and even, overlapping just slightly every time. you're going to get a better effect. When you are going over the eyes and the nose, you want to make sure that you're gently pushing the paper into all of those creases. Occasionally, you'll get pieces that just don't fit right, and maybe you'll get a gap. You can always just go back in with a smaller piece. Okay, so right here, I don't want to pull that straight. I want to very gently press it to the crevices or the divots on the face. Okay. And just keep going over the whole entire thing. We're not going to worry about leaving empty spaces right now. We want to get the whole mask covered in paper mache strips. Okay. So I put the first layer over the top of the face. Now, you do want to get this covered down here as well. So I'm going to take strips after I get the whole front of the face done. I'm going to take strips and go along the sides. Now when I do this, kind of go along the edge, I'm going to go right to the edge of my mask and have this piece go straight out. And I'll smooth this up. And they do overlap the other pieces, and that's fine. I don't want to wrap that around to the back side, okay? So just keep that sticking out for now. The reason is if you wrap it around to the back, it's going to be really difficult to take it off the form later on. These plastic forms are going to come out of our mask eventually. So I can just keep going along the edge. Okay, if you start to notice that your mask is getting really goopy, just take your finger and kind of give it a scrape it off into the bucket to get the excess off. So I'm just going to keep on going. You don't need to have that much hanging off. I've got a lot hanging off the edge here, and that will stick to the newspaper down below. So you really only have to come kind of right to the edge of that. And then keep right on going. And if the newspaper starts to want to go in a different direction, that's fine. Just work with it. Keep going. All right, so the goal is to get the whole mask covered going vertically first. And then after you get, or I'm sorry, horizontally, go from side to side, get the whole thing covered all the way around. Then once you get the first layer done, you can move right on to the second layer. You don't have to wait for it to dry. Dunk your strips, and then you're going to go in another direction. I like to start going side to side, and then for the second layer, go up and down. If you do find that pieces get a little lumpy, especially around the nose, if you want to rip down smaller pieces to kind of get around the nose, that's just fine. Today, you're going to try to put on at least 3 layers. If you do 4, that's fine. You don't want to go more than 4 because they really need to dry out well overnight. So after you get the first 3 layers put on, you'll want to either set those in your locker or up above your locker. Since they all look the same, I highly, highly recommend that you write your name with a Sharpie on a little piece of newspaper so it doesn't smear, and then stick it right to the top of your mask, like right before you clean up for the day, so that you have a piece of paper with your name on it. And Sharpie is the best way to go. If you use a regular marker, it'll all just, it'll run and smear. The first step is just getting the basic form of our mask done, and we're going to be adding more to these later on.